everybody. Welcome to the Evening Reader. My name is Priscilla, and I'm here today to talk about my first book for Trans Girl April, and that is Nevada by Imogen Binnie. And this was published originally, I believe, in 2013. And it was recently reissued with an afterword by the author in this edition. So some good stuff here. This is one of the two novels that I picked to read for Trans Girl April. I'm reading novels mainly because fiction's my main thing, and then also I'm only reading two books because I'm traveling this month and I'm terrible at TBRs. So I talked about this in my April Reads video, so I won't go into what the other book is and why. But this was my first book, and I picked it up immediately after I bought it and started reading it and could not put it down. I enjoyed it so much. This is told in two parts. It spans about a month in time, and it's set in the mid-aughts. And the first part is called Late October, and the second part is called Late November. And in the first part, we meet Maria. And just right at the beginning of the book, in the opening scene, just to let you know, it starts with a sex scene right off the bat. Somewhat graphic. Nothing unusual or surprising necessarily, but we find out, we know right away. So Maria is having sex with her girlfriend Steph, and she is not in it. She is not into it, and we find out right away that she feels like she's kind of tired of this relationship that she's been in for about 4 years. This section is mostly from Maria's point of view. It's close third person. And so close in third person that she sometimes shifts to second person. But the you is not the reader. The you is really partially herself, and then also partially, I think, really talking to other trans people who are out there. Maria is she works at a bookstore. She's 29 years old. She transitioned or started transitioning when she was 23, but she knew pretty much her whole life that something was not quite right, that she didn't feel right in her body, that she felt like she really maybe wanted to be a girl, but she didn't have the words to express it, and that she got signals early on in her whole life from her family, from TV, from school, from you name it, that feeling that way was pretty much just not okay. That if she was a little boy who wanted to wear a dress or play with dolls or what have you, that this was just not going to be okay. And so when she was a teenager, she sort of she grew up in a town in rural Pennsylvania. She calls it Cowtown throughout the whole book, and she just sort of took on a really normal adolescent boy persona, I guess, that you'd say was sort of just not a jock, but not really necessarily a weirdo, an okay student, but just kind of hanging out with people who were, I guess you would say, kind of burnouts, more on the freaks and end of the freaks and geeks spectrum. One of her friends was really racist and kind of awful and really into heroin, which she tried a few times and really liked because she could just sort of check out of her life. Grew up in a loving family, no abuse, none of the usual, tropes that I think a lot of people think must be behind somebody wanting to be a trans. And she just finally realized when she was in her early 20s that because of the rise of the internet, that there were people out there and message boards, that there were people out there who were feeling the way she was feeling and going through what she felt like she was going through, which is that she wasn't able to connect with herself. She wasn't really able to connect with anybody else. She was just locking herself inside of her apartment, reading books and drinking heavily. and just not connecting at all. So she's working at a corporate job. She leaves that job. She goes to work at the bookstore, and while she's at the bookstore, she decides to begin to transition. And about 2 years pass, and she's kind of into her transition, and she meets Steph. And Steph is her girlfriend then for the next 4 years. And Steph is cis, but she is homosexual. She, I guess, identifies as a dyke because Maria calls her, she says about when she met her, she was purple hair, baby dyke. She's a feminist. She's an activist, a queer activist, very much into that. But through the course of their relationship, Steph has started to grow up. She started to change, and she's become more of what Maria calls a power lesbian. She's doing really well at work. She's advancing. She's wanting to advance her career. She's gone from wearing, her punk clothes and her little buttons and her purple hair to having a more serious kind of haircut and having, wearing pinstripe suits. She's very responsible, and it's just their relationship is changing. And I would say it's really probably Steph that's changing, and Maria is still working at the same bookstore and kind of still the same person that she was before she transitioned in a lot of ways, which was to be kind of punk, kind of, she uses the word dirtbag, dirty, listening to a lot of the same music. She's educated herself a lot about, what it means to, I don't know even what to say, to be trans, to be queer, to be in the world. The problem is, though, that Maria doesn't really fit anywhere. And as a trans woman, she just doesn't feel like she belongs in any particular group, except maybe that group of trans women. But even that group is, I don't want to say splintered, but there are so many differences. There are little tells, little things that are different. Are you a trans woman who likes men? Are you a trans woman who is into women? Are you a trans woman who is really more like, she goes to a support group and she finds out that really it's more transvestites than people who are trans and actually want to be women. So there's a lot of complexity, and Maria is trying to figure this all out. And she is so intelligent and so funny, and just the way that this is written, her voice is so clear, so unique, and so wonderful. So she's having this problem with Steph. She's thinking, I don't think I want to be with you anymore. And somebody at work who is actually a trans man who she works with and is sort of friends with, named Kieran. Steph says that she's had sex with Kieran, and then Kieran says, yeah, we had sex. And this kind of like just blows Maria's world up a little bit, because she's thinking, who is Steph? Who am I? What do I want? She's trying to figure it out. They're having a rocky time. And so Maria goes to see her friend Piranha, who is another trans woman. It's Maria who calls her Piranha. Her real name is Melissa. And she is a woman who is sort of agoraphobic, but she works at a drugstore and takes a lot of drugs, and basically just has decided that she doesn't want to have to deal with anybody or anything. And another focus that is true for Maria and for Piranha is that they're trying hard to save up money so that they can complete their transition and get their bottom surgery. Both of them are living as women and are mostly women, except for that, I guess, critical step. And so she goes to see Piranha and she crashes there for the night. And she's sort of like going through all this and she's journaling and she's trying to figure out what's going on and what she's doing. And things just kind of implode, I guess you would say. And so she comes up with this, what she thinks is a brilliant plan to maybe just be really irresponsible, because she's always had to be so responsible for the feelings of others, especially in terms of hiding who she was for so long, and because she could only think about what that would do to her parents and their standing in the community. She's an only child, so no siblings there, but also, how would her friends think of her? And just always sort of repressing and repressing. And she thinks, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to take this opportunity. My life is really changing. Things are sort of falling away without me even kind of doing anything. I'm going to be really irresponsible. I'm going to do something completely crazy and irresponsible. And so she asks to borrow Steph's car and she takes off on a road trip. So like I said, the first section is all from Maria's point of view, except one chapter. Steph has one chapter. And in that chapter, it's very interesting because we get a different picture of Maria than she is giving us of herself, or that she is even giving herself of herself. And that really sort of informs the second section and also what we've been hearing from Maria about what's going on. There are a few things. So I think I mentioned, Maria is sort of infamous on the internet, and it is, like I said, this is the mid-aughts. So she has a live journal, which was, I guess she had started it in the early 2000s when she was starting to transition, and talking about what the process was and sharing that and sharing her feelings, on an anonymous live journal that became very popular for people who were exploring this and were having the same feelings and really looking into what it would mean to transition. And so I think some of the time when she's talking to herself and she's constantly narrating, she is talking to them. And then sometimes she's really truly just talking to herself. I think she's trying to talk her way into some kind of existence. If you've ever heard of a book called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life by a man named Irving Goffman, it was written in the 1950s or published in 1956. That is very much about how we are constantly narrating to ourselves and presenting ourselves in certain ways all of the time. Everything is a presentation. Everything is we're constantly on a stage and trying to fit ourselves into a narrative. And that's really a lot of what Maria is trying to do. She's trying to figure out what narrative she fits in and how. And it's just really fascinating. And her voice is just unbelievably compelling. And I really like the way that Binnie has written Maria's voice. And I say it's her voice, even though it's third person, because it's just really just very compelling. So here she is, and she's riding her bike, and she says she heads in the direction opposite of her house toward Midtown Manhattan. Obviously, you can't ride all night instead of going home. You'll get too tired and bored, and obviously there is work in the morning, but she decides to ride for a while. One nice thing is that her phone's in her bag, which means if Steph calls, she won't hear it. She's kind of aware that she's making herself the bad guy here, that she's kind of acting like an asshole. Whatever, yes, sure, fine, whatever, fine, sure, who cares? She rides uptown. Riding a bike in most of Manhattan at night totally rules, but riding through Midtown is awful 24 hours a day. It's practically impossible, unless you were trying to get bruised on a bumper, which is a mood she's in sometimes. A mood she might be in now, actually. Even on a Sunday night like tonight, it's pretty gnarly. It's all hills and gridlocked 18-wheelers, buses and cabs, so you have to cut between the cars. That's the best, cutting between cars. She pumps her legs up a hill, and they start to hurt. She puts a hand out and thumps a taxi's side mirror. This could be the beginning of an all-night odyssey, like Eyes Wide Shut or something. But then she's over the hill. Her bike is coasting downhill, and then she's climbing another hill. Her legs protest, so she pulls over onto a sidewalk. A movie is actually a really good idea. So this is just, it's not stream of consciousness, but we are very much in her head and very, very close to her. And she's just so intelligent and very likable, but also she is a little frustrating. And in that way that, you know, I think to be inside anybody's head that close and really know what's going on in there could be a bit frustrating, but it's also very enlightening and very, I mean, just incredibly, incredibly deep to hear the thoughts of somebody who really is struggling to figure out where they belong and still figuring out who they are, because she doesn't really know. She doesn't have it all figured out. But she takes off in Steph's car, and that's the end of the first section. And the second section, it's a month later, and it is late November, and we meet James. And James lives in Star City, Nevada, which is a tiny little town, I guess not too far from Reno, maybe a couple of hours from Reno. And the only thing there is a Walmart. The town has actually been built up around this super Walmart that was built there. And it has sort of this like feature, which is part of its parking lot. It has a bridge that's been built over a river there. And it's sort of like a local attraction. Something that you can pull off the highway and look at, and I guess do your shopping at Walmart. So James is 20 years old. He's lived in Star City, Nevada his entire life. And we're in third person. We're in James's head. And, you know, he kind of hates everything about his life. He has a girlfriend named Nicole. And he's not really connecting with Nicole. He's not really connecting with work. He doesn't really have any friends. He's not connecting with anything. He is a major, major stoner. He's always stoned. He's constantly smoking pot. And he's really checked out of his life. And we do learn that, you know, he has a date with Nicole and she leaves, and he gets on the internet and he starts cruising around. And he looks at some porn, and he looks at some message boards, and, you know, we hear what's going on in his head. And essentially it is this: he has decided that he realizes on some level that he wants to be a woman. He's self-diagnosed himself with what's called autogynephilia, which is essentially he is somebody who is aroused at the thought of becoming a woman. And he believes himself to be a pervert. But he can't help himself. He also just feels very compelled to continue to look at images and to read about it. I mean, he's reading what's out there on the internet in 2008 about like what experts are saying about this thing. And I cannot remember the name of the doctors off the top of my head, and I'll put them on the screen. And that's how he's kind of come about this self-diagnosis. So he's at work one day, and he's working over in the music department, and all of a sudden here is this woman who's wearing all of these layers of clothing and has this long red hair. And it turns out, of course, to be Maria. And she comes in, and immediately they recognize each other. This section actually goes back and forth between Maria and James's point of view. And then there is also one chapter that is in Nicole's point of view. And that sort of gives us this picture of what she thinks of James and what Nicole is like. But the majority of it goes back and forth between Maria and James, and sort of how they are trying to connect, but really cross-talking, because James sees Maria and then almost immediately realizes she's trans and that she's so cool and that he really wants to do something to make her stay so that he can talk to her, so that he can ask her some questions. And she immediately sees in him that he is so much like she was before she transitioned. She sees herself in him. And they spend pretty much the entire time they go eat, they go to James's apartment, they get really high, they hang out. James can't bring himself to ask questions. Maria doesn't necessarily want to push him, but she thinks, well, he needs to recognize what's going on here. Maybe I can be that person that maybe if I had known sooner, if there had been somebody in my life who could have recognized me and offered themselves up so that I could ask questions, I could be that person for him. But they're just kind of always cross talking. And they decide to go to Reno together, and they spend a lot of time in the car, and Maria tries to talk to him and tries to tell him what her experience has been. And yeah, the book ends in Reno. And I don't want to give the ending away. But it's really fascinating. And one thing I liked about the structure of the book is that rather than going back, like constructing this where she could have like maybe gone back in time and shown us Maria, whose name we don't ever know who she was as a male. She's just Maria. But when she was younger, instead of going back to that time and showing us who she was before she transitioned, she gives us James. And she gives us James and where he is and his struggles and exactly what he's going through and what he's thinking about. And so we get to see sort of, it's not two sides of a coin. It's more like what the spectrum can look like for people who are trans, where they can be at any given moment. And that really, they slide along it. They sort of slide along this spectrum. And especially somebody in James's position who just really, really isn't sure. So, because Binnie said in the afterword, Binnie says she really wanted to address that idea of if I'd known sooner, if I'd had somebody to talk to, if that I might have just, it may have been magical and I may have just done it and I may have gone ahead and it would have been great. And she's really sort of, with James, she gets to address that, not having knowledge isn't always necessarily the only problem that's there. And, here's Maria, who has tons of knowledge and experience and she's got lived experience, and she's still trying to figure out where she belongs, who she belongs with, if she belongs with anybody. And, it's just an ongoing process, especially, at this point in time in 2007 or 2008, when this is set. The social media aspect beyond MySpace, the beginnings of Facebook and LiveJournal, there's none of that. There's no Twitter. There's no Twitter yet. So there's a lot of the systems that are in place now and the voices that are there now didn't exist at the time when Binnie was writing this. And this is really considered to be like one of the first, I guess you'd want to say, crossover trans novels that was a popular novel. And so, I guess she was kind of a voice for what it means to be a trans woman in America at that time. It's just fantastically told. It's just very well done. The writing flows so well. She says she was highly influenced by Junot Diaz. uh, in the way he wrote his novel, The Brief Life of Oscar Wilde, and then also his collection of short stories, Drown. That, you know, in using the language that sort of like how people really sound, how their voice is really in their head. It works very well. It's not stream of consciousness. There's definitely it's definitely more structured than that, but it sounds very real. And James and Maria echo each other. Their voices sort of echo, although James's is more tightly controlled. James is more anxious, but it's the same voice in a way that Maria has. And then Steph has her own voice as a dyke. That's how she identifies, as a cis dyke, I guess. And then Nicole has her voice then as a cis hetero feminist female. And so we get these different perspectives, and we get the perspectives of James and Maria from their points of view. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably reread this because it's just very well written, and there's a lot to take in. And she also just name checks some of my favorite authors, Mary Gaitskill, Amy Hempel, within the book. So that's really fun. I just enjoyed. I really enjoyed spending time with these characters and getting this perspective. I highly recommend this book if you're interested in what this experience must be like. But really, I mean, if you just like good fiction, if you like a road story, if you like good relationship stories, it's just a fantastic novel. So yeah, highly recommend it. Fully enjoyed it. This was I would say it's got a few little bumps. I'd say it was 4.5 stars for me. So yeah, first book for Trans Girl April, Nevada, Imogen Binnie. Check it out. And if you've read this, let me know. And if you've read something, let me know what you're reading for Trans Girl April. I always get so nervous when I'm closing out these things. But yeah, let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you think you'd be interested in this, or if you have any other recommendations. Okay. And remember, maybe hit like and subscribe. Okay, take care. Bye.